Right, hello. We've got Alison Huntingford with us today, historical novelist. And Alison, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, Natalie. Lovely to talk to you and to everybody who might be interested in our talk. Thank you very much for having me at the Blandford Literary Festival. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm a historical novelist, and all my books, this is the third one that I've put out, and that's the one I'll be talking about at the festival. They're all based on my own family history, so they're based on a lot of true stories. Um, so what I do is I do a lot of family history research in archives online, and I find stories that inspire me, and then I put it into a fictionalized account. But being as truthful to the actual events that happened as I possibly can. And this is now my third novel. I'm writing a fourth one at the moment.
Oh, gosh.
I'm also the founder of the South Hams Authors Network, which is a collective of local writers in the South Devon area. And we have now run three literary festivals. So I understand the amount of work that goes into it. Yes, it's a lot of hard work, but it's well worth it. So,
That's
yeah.
yeah, fantastic. That's brilliant. Gosh, your fourth novel as well, working on that at the moment. We'll come on to that in a second, see if find out a bit more about that. So, Dance a Fearful Jig, how did that, what was prompted you to write that? You say it's from your family history, but did you discover something that made you want to look more into that particular? Because it's about Norman's Cross, isn't it? That's right.
Yes, it's about Norman Cross prison camp,
Yeah.
Napoleonic prisoner of war camp, which I didn't even know existed until I started doing the research.
Mm.
Yeah, I found one particular shocking event, which occurred in 1808, in Peterborough, which involved my great great aunt, however many times back it is. Um, and that was in what's called a one name study, which like looks at all the records of that particular surname across the country going back generations.
Mhm.
And there was some fascinating documents, which I can't say too much because that would be giving it away.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you
Yeah.
want to find out more, come to the talk and you'll
Yeah.
find out all about it. But there was a particularly shocking incident that I then felt inspired to tell the story of
Yeah.
what led up to it, really.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of research in the area and found that there was a Napoleonic prisoner of war camp in the area, which I'd never even heard of. The first prisoner of war camp in Britain. Um, and that was taking people, Frenchmen, Dutchmen, Italian, Spanish, from the Napoleonic Wars. So it was fascinating,
Oh
absolutely
gosh.
fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, because you went on to write a novel about it, which is your latest
Well,
release now.
well,
So,
yes,
you know, it's
yeah.
it's clearly struck a chord with you. I mean, do you love the past history? You know, is it something you're really passionate about? You know, what's your favorite era?
I love the 19th century and the Victorians. This one here is slightly earlier than that, because it's the beginning of the 19th century, right, the very beginning. I mean, I love all the 19th century, well, right through into the early 20th and to the First World War, really.
Yeah.
I just find it absolutely fascinating. But
Yeah.
when I was at school, I didn't like history because
Oh,
they were
really? That
just,
was one of my questions. Was you a history
yeah.
buff at school?
No, I wasn't at all. Because all they ever seemed to study was the Industrial Revolution
Yeah.
and imports and exports, and I found it really, really boring. But I love visiting castles and stately homes and all those kind of things. And then when I started getting into family history, well, that absolutely fascinated me.
Mm. So
It's
did
just
you
because it's
did
all about real people.
exactly. So
Mm.
did you look into your family tree? Is that what has sparked all of this, do you think? This, you know, seeing your history come alive for you in real life, really.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was a child, I always wanted to be a writer. I always had this
Oh,
dream
wow.
I was going to write books,
Mm.
but then real life got in the way, and did all sorts of other things in the meantime. But because I'm an only child and I'm an only child of two only children,
Mm.
that means I've got no family, no aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. And now all my parents and grandparents, they're all gone as well. So it's
Mm.
only me. And so, of course, I wanted to look into what was my family,
Yeah.
where my family came from, because I didn't have any of my own.
Yeah.
So that prompted me to research into all the family tree.
Mm.
And what I found there is just fascinating. The stories that so inspired me.
Yeah.
Just real people, not famous people or rich people, but stories of struggle, hardship,
Yeah.
surviving, so it
And
just
that
inspired me. Right.
they're sort of traits that really will give a really strong character, aren't they? You know, so the characters
Yes,
in your
yeah. I mean, these
stories.
people really had to be tough to
Yeah.
survive what they did, I mean, we've got it so easy
Yeah.
now, up against what they went through.
No,
So,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So where do you start then? Obviously, when you write historical fiction, what's your starting point? Is the idea there and then you have to go and research every detail of that, or is there a plot that comes alive for you? How do you start?
Well, usually it's one particular event in somebody's life that inspires me, and I think, right, how did they get to that? How did they react to it? What happened? I mean, my first novel was all about an ancestor that I found out who'd stolen six chickens
Oh,
in the early 19th century, and of course, he was sentenced to transportation, as they were
yeah,
in those
yeah.
days. So I found out all about it. So once you get something like that, then you start researching into what happened, what conditions were like, you know,
Yeah.
how was it actually he never ended up going to New South Wales.
Mm.
And you the more you do, the more you learn, and then you learn other things as you go along and you look into other things. It leads to all sorts of things.
So all the time that you're
So
doing that research, is a plot forming in your head for your characters? I know that you say that they're based on real life, your stories.
yes, well, the plot's there really. It's how I get them to the events that I know about.
Yeah,
So Um, I mean, I try and make it as truthful as I possibly can with all
yeah,
the events and even the dates and names of people where possible.
yeah,
But I have to get them from one event to another event,
yeah.
and I don't always know that. So I have to then think how that might have happened.
But
So
is
that's
that
where the imagination.
I was going to say, is that quite nice though? Is that a little bit of freedom for you as a writer to be able to
Mm,
fill in those gaps,
yes.
the creativity there?
Yeah, it is because you have to imagine what they were like as people because you don't really know that. You can guess from what happened to them
Mm.
as to how they would have reacted to it, how they would have survived. But you don't really know what they're like as people, and you don't really know what happened between like one census, and the next,
Yeah.
or one child's birth and the next, what happened there.
Mm.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of freedom as well,
Yeah.
so creative freedom in between. So
Yeah. No, that's lovely. That's really lovely. And your first novel was surrounded about, was it a figurine? Your first
yes,
novel.
that's
So
right.
what
Yeah.
what was the story
And
behind that?
right, well, my mum had a little tiny glass ball gold. He's only about that size. And she passed him down to me, and she'd been passed that from her gran in the sort of who was alive in the 19th century, and it had come down from this particular family, um, the ancestor of whom was the one who got sentenced for stealing the
All
chickens.
right,
So
okay.
it had come down. So, it's an actual artifact that I've still got.
Mm.
And, you wonder about the people that owned it and how they loved it and what happened to them. So, yeah. So that became a sort of metaphor for survival, really,
Yeah.
rather than the story. The whole story doesn't revolve around it, but the
Right.
family that had that. And it's sort of because it's glass, it's battered, it's worn, but it's still survived over
Yeah.
100 or more years later. So
Yeah.
it's all about survival, resilience, that kind
Yeah.
of thing, really.
No, that's nice. That's a nice to be able to build around that really, because I think you start with a story with that, don't you? And you end with it. So
Mm,
it's quite
yeah.
poignant, really. Nice to do
Yes,
it.
it
So
is.
I mean,
And
would
and
you
it's a
sorry.
no, I was going to say it's a much loved family heirloom. So
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. It does sound like it. With your writing group, because obviously you've got this wealth of historical information at your fingertips, do you bring that into your writing connections in South Devon? Do you sort of inspire others to do similar sort of historical novels using your methods?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we don't run a sort of creative writing group. Ours is all about making connections and supporting each other with this, each
Mm,
other's books and getting running events and things
mm,
like that. But we do have quite a lot of historical fiction authors in our midst.
yeah.
And there's another lady who actually has worked really closely with me on the festival and all the artwork,
Mm.
Lily Style, who's actually writes from her family history as well, because she's
Oh,
descended from Horatio Nelson.
oh
So,
wow. Wow. So
yeah, so she's got very famous connections.
see, I just wondered whether,
So yes.
because sometimes looking at a family tree can be quite daunting, can't it? But if you've got somebody who
Hmm.
writes in a similar fashion to you through the same sort of research, it's nice to have somebody just to bounce ideas off of. So you're
That's
connecting,
right, yeah. And we've shared stalls at book fairs and
Mm,
things like that because we're both on a similar vein. And so we sort of understand where we're both coming from. So
mm.
our ancestors are very important to us.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you go about recreating the voices of those characters? Because obviously we can look up the documentation of the past, but it's very difficult
Hmm.
to find the true language and voice of the characters. How have you dealt with that kind of thing?
Well, I've made a few slip ups in the past because if you're not careful, you end up using what is modern language, but you don't realize it's modern language.
Mm,
So for one of my books, I'd put okay in as a part of speech, but okay didn't come into use until much later on.
yeah.
So I had to go back and change all that. And so now I'm much more careful about that. I do a lot of research on phrases and expressions to try and get them authentic to the period
Mm,
because people didn't have the same slang or
yeah.
casual phrases we have, but they had other ones that
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't know now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do have to be extremely careful. And as I say, I have slipped up in the past. I'm beginning to learn now and to
Yeah.
watch myself.
That must be
Mhm.
incredibly time consuming to keep checking yourself, I suppose.
Mm.
When so does that come about in an
Absolutely.
edit? When you edit it, do you suddenly look at a word and go, "Oh, I don't think they would have said that," and then have to go and research what they would have said?
Yeah. Well, nowadays I'm more aware of it as I'm writing.
Mm.
So I'm
Right.
much more switched on to it. But I do stop and look at things as I go along and research. If I think, I wonder if they would have said that then, and I'll stop, research it, and do it before I actually put it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then there's other little things like food is altered,
Oh,
and
yeah.
takeaway things and all that kind of thing. Or like my character in The Glass Bulldog, Tom, he walks across London in 1837
Mm.
and he has to cross a bridge, but some of the bridges weren't built then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the London bridges we know weren't actually built.
Yeah.
So you
No,
have to
that's
make
right.
sure he goes over the right one. So it's surprising what if you're not careful, so I'm more careful than I used to be. I'm more switched on to it now.
Do you have
But
any
yeah, you
sort
do.
of reference books that you go to time and time again? Is there anything in your
There's a
collection?
brilliant book that I used for the last one, which is all about the Napoleonic prisoner of war camp that I based a lot of it around.
Mm,
And that's an absolute brilliant work of reference on that. It's a non-fiction with lots of tales of the prisoners, and the prisoners were making crafts and stuff there. So there's
mm.
pictures of all of that. So that was a wonderful reference for that
Yeah,
particular book.
yeah,
But I mean, I spend a lot of time online, but you have to be very careful because one online source will often contradict another one.
yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely, definitely, because you're dealing with those opinions of of the research
yeah.
of that time. So yeah, it's a
And I've got
minefield
a lot
then,
of Reader's
really.
Digest books. Yeah, I've got a load of Reader's Digest books that I go
Yeah.
to as well,
Oh my
which are
God.
brilliant. So,
Have you
mm.
ever done um a novel that isn't historical? Or is there any desire to do that? Or do you think you will always go back to historical fiction?
I think for my novels will always be historical fiction. I do write some short stories occasionally, which
Mhm.
are, I suppose, quirky supernatural more than
Oh,
anything.
right. Okay.
Yeah, but they're not historical at all.
Yeah.
They tend to be set in the contemporary, or even my recent one was set in the near future.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they tend to be a bit odd, a bit quirky, a bit,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you find
But I
they're
think
like,
my novels,
I was going to say your
mm,
short stories, do you find then that they are really good like warm-ups to get you writing and thinking, or are they just
yeah,
pure
and I think
fun?
they're an escape. They're a bit
Yeah.
they're sort of freer. You don't have to make them any particular length. You don't
Mm.
have to spend ages developing a character,
Yeah.
that's going to last throughout a whole book.
Yeah.
They can be quite short. So, and you can do it in any genre or anything you want to do. So
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
freeing to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I think my novels will always be historical because that's what inspires,
Yeah.
me to do a big novel.
Yeah. And obviously your workshop, which is on the Friday, the 15th of November, and that's at the Royal British Legion at midday, I think it is, your time
That's
slot.
right. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
without giving too much away, what can people expect from your session?
Well, I should be talking all about this book here and about the Napoleonic prisoner of war camp. So I should be able to give a lot more detail about that,
Mhm.
a lot more detail about the two main characters and how it develops. And there'll be some pictures of the kind of things that the prisoners made. And yeah, a lot more about family history generally,
Mhm.
and about the story. And I'll be reading a few short extracts, so people can get the flavour of the book itself. So
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And obviously they get to meet you and I presume be able to ask any questions if they want to after your session maybe.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, and we are, I mean, with this South Thames Authors Network, we're very supportive of all authors who are
Mhm.
trying to get published or whatever. We don't limit it to South Devon. We've got Facebook group and things where we have
Mm.
people from all over the Southwest join us. So if anybody wants to just come and chat to me about publishing or anything connected with that, they're more than welcome as well. You
That's
know,
fantastic.
I'm
That's
happy to
really
give advice.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you, Alison. That's fantastic. Now, one of the question I've been asking everybody, um, just for a bit of fun, what published book do you wish you'd written? Something that's already out there that you love and you wish, oh, I wish I'd written that.
Well, my all-time favorite book is Lord of the Rings by Tolkien.
All right.
I love reading fantasy. If I could write fantasy, I'd love to, but I would never ever be able to compare with that. So, I mean, how can I try, really?
Oh, that's
Um, just love, I just love the scope of it, the
yeah.
whole world thing, the amount of characters. It's just wonderful. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
can't recommend it enough.
To have a moment in that man's mind, just
Mm,
to be able to do that. No,
wonderful,
that was a really good
wonderful.
choice. Really good choice. I put you on the
Yeah.
spot there. That's a good one. So,
That's my desert island book. That would be
yes,
the one book I would take if I was stuck on a desert island. I'd be all right then. I'd
yeah,
be
no,
in
you
Middle
would. That
Earth
would be a good
all
one.
the time.
That's well, Alison, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for chatting with us today and telling us all about your novel. Obviously, you'll have the book there with you at the festival. Um, and
Yes.
we look forward to seeing you. Be really lovely to meet
Yes,
you.
lovely. I'm really looking forward to talking to everybody about it. And,
Yeah,
feel free to ask any questions. And
yeah,
I'll see you all there, I
yeah.
hope.
And you'll bring books with you as well that you
I
can
will.
sign.
Yes, I'll
Yeah,
have all my books will be with me. So they'll
brilliant.
all be for sale. And I can sign them for people as well. So
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We shall see you in a few weeks' time.
thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Bye bye.
Bye.